Daddy Pig and George are getting ready for fishing at the old pond. An ordinary family trip turns into a nightmare beyond imagination. The fishing rods start shaking by themselves mysteriously and violently. Something invisible pulls them underwater with tremendous force. George points to a dark shadow in the water below. It moves against the current unnaturally and purposefully. A gray figure appears on the opposite shore suddenly. White crosses in eyes glow brightly in growing twilight. Labubu waves his paw, inviting them to come closer. His smile is too wide for any friendliness or warmth. Daddy tries to start the boat engine repeatedly, but it dies. They are trapped on the water completely and helplessly. Labubu enters the water and walks on the surface calmly. Water freezes beneath his furry paws instantly and unnaturally. George hides behind Daddy in growing fear and panic. Labubu's shadow surrounds the boat completely and coldly. Labubu sings a children's song backwards very slowly. Words sound like an ancient magical spell from darkness. Fish float belly up around the boat in perfect circles. Eyes glow with eerie white light of death. Daddy tries to row desperately with all his strength, but oars turn to ice. The boat sinks slowly. Labubu extends his paw, offering help very kindly. Touch turns everything to cold stone immediately and permanently. George turns to stone from bottom up gradually. Daddy screams loudly, but sound doesn't carry anywhere at all. Labubu laughs loudly and menacingly. Laughter echoes across the pond. Birds fly away in complete terror. Daddy grabs George tightly and jumps into water desperately. Water is thick like heavy syrup around them. They sink in slow motion helplessly together. Labubu watches with a satisfied, creepy smile of victory. At home, Peppa and Mummy wait for return anxiously. Sun sets behind dark trees ominously. Mummy calls Daddy repeatedly and desperately, but phone is silent. Anxiety grows every passing minute terribly. Labubu collects fishing rods carefully and puts in boat, his new precious trophies collected for eternity. Daddy and George stand at bottom like stone statues, eyes glow with white light forever. Labubu disappears in thick fog mysteriously and completely. White lights flicker underwater eerily forever and ever. In morning, rescuers find empty boat floating alone. Daddy and George were never there at all. Peppa Pig's neighborhood always seemed like the perfect place. But today, something strange moved into the house next door. A bright yellow moving truck arrived early morning. The new neighbor looked friendly enough from distance. It was SpongeBob with his square shape and smile. Peppa and George watched excitedly from their window. Mummy Pig suggested they welcome their new neighbor properly. The family prepared a basket of fresh cookies. Daddy Pig knocked on SpongeBob's door with enthusiasm. The yellow sponge answered with an unusually wide grin. SpongeBob's eyes seemed different up close, but nobody noticed. He thanked them politely for the warm welcome. The first week passed peacefully without any problems. SpongeBob waved cheerfully every morning from his garden. Peppa invited SpongeBob over for afternoon tea and games. He accepted the invitation with that same strange smile. During tea time, SpongeBob's laugh echoed strangely through house. It sounded hollow and somehow mechanical in nature. George noticed SpongeBob never blinked during their conversation. His eyes remained fixed like glass marbles. That night, Peppa heard weird scratching sounds next door. The noises continued until early morning hours. The next day, SpongeBob's garden looked completely different. All flowers had turned an unnatural shade. Susie Sheep came to visit but felt uncomfortable. She whispered that something felt terribly wrong. Pedro Pony refused to play when SpongeBob was around. He claimed the yellow neighbor made him sick. Strange things began happening around the neighborhood frequently. Toys disappeared and reappeared in impossible places. Children started having nightmares about a grinning yellow face. The dreams felt too real to be imagination. SpongeBob's house glowed with eerie light every night. Red shadows danced behind his curtained windows. Peppa finally looked closely into SpongeBob's eyes one evening. They were completely black with tiny red dots. His smile never changed, even when nobody watched. It remained frozen in that unnatural position. The neighborhood children began avoiding SpongeBob's house completely, but he continued watching from his window. Late at night, residents heard his mechanical laughter. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once. SpongeBob still waves from his garden every morning, but now everyone knows something is wrong. The peaceful village where Peppa Pig lived had always been safe and cheerful, but deep in the dark forest, something ancient and terrible had awakened from its slumber. Strange roars echoed through the trees at night, frightening all the animals. The forest creatures whispered about a green giant with glowing red eyes. Peppa heard the grown-ups talking about the mysterious newcomer in hushed voices. They said he was different from anyone they had ever seen. Daddy Pig dismissed the rumors as silly forest tales and legends, but Mummy Pig noticed how the birds had stopped singing near the woods. George found strange, massive footprints near their garden fence one morning. The prints were deeper than any animal they knew could make. Grandpa Pig warned the family to stay away from the forest, but curiosity burned bright in Peppa's adventurous heart, stronger than any warning. The family decided to venture into the woods to meet their neighbor. They packed a picnic basket, thinking it would be a friendly visit. As they walked deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller and darker. The cheerful bird song faded into an eerie, unnatural silence. A terrible smell filled the air, like rotting vegetables and swamp water. Mummy Pig suggested they should turn back, but Daddy Pig insisted they continue. They found a crude hut made of mud and twisted branches. Smoke rose from a chimney and strange shadows moved behind dirty windows. The door creaked open, revealing a massive green figure with burning eyes. His smile showed rows of sharp, yellowed teeth that gleamed menacingly. Shrek's voice was deep and rumbling, like distant thunder before a storm. He invited the family inside with gestures that seemed almost too eager. The interior of the hut was dark and filled with mysterious objects. Bones hung from the ceiling, and strange potions bubbled in dirty cauldrons. Peppa felt uneasy as Shrek's red eyes followed their every movement. George hid behind Mummy Pig, sensing something was terribly wrong with their host. Shrek offered them food that looked spoiled and smelled awful. When they politely declined, his friendly expression began to change into something sinister. The family tried to leave, but the door had mysteriously locked itself. The windows were too high, and Shrek blocked their only escape route. One by one, the family members began to feel drowsy and confused. The air in the hut seemed to grow thicker and harder to breathe. Peppa's vision blurred as she watched her family members collapse around her. Shrek's laughter echoed through the hut, cold and terrifying. The next morning, the village noticed the pig family hadn't returned home. Search parties combed the forest but found no trace of them. Days passed and the family's house stood empty and silent. Their car remained in the driveway, covered with fallen leaves and morning dew. Weeks later, hikers reported seeing strange lights in Shrek's part of the forest. But when they investigated, they found only an empty clearing. The hut had vanished without a trace, leaving only scorched earth behind. No one ever saw the pig family or the mysterious green stranger again. Local children now avoid the forest, especially when darkness falls. Peppa's house always seemed like a safe place, but nobody knew what dark secrets were hidden here. The family returns home after a long vacation. Heavy suitcases bang loudly on the porch steps. Daddy Pig opens the door with his key. The lock creaks strangely and ominously in the silence. Peppa runs inside, oinking happily with joy. Her bright smile quickly disappears from her face. Things in the living room are out of place. Someone was definitely here during their absence. Mummy Pig notices wet footprints on the floor. They lead from the front door to the stairs. George clutches Mr. Dinosaur tightly to his chest. The little one senses danger in the house. Daddy turns on the lights, but bulbs flicker, Electricity creates eerie shadows dancing on walls. Strange sounds come from the bathroom upstairs. Someone is splashing in the water above them. The family slowly climbs the creaking stairs. Each step groans ominously under their feet. The sounds become louder and much stranger. This is definitely not ordinary bathing. Peppa carefully opens the bathroom door. Inside glows dim reddish light from flickering candles. In the bathtub sits a creature with coral red fur, huge glowing eyes and a terrifying smile. Labubu slowly turns his head toward the family. Sharp teeth glisten in the flickering candlelight. The creature begins to giggle quietly. The sound echoes throughout the entire house eerily. The water in the tub turns dark and murky. Labubu smiles without taking his eyes off them. Daddy tries desperately to close the door. The handle burns his hand with icy cold. Labubu rises from the bathtub very slowly. He takes a deliberate step toward the exit. The family steps back in terror. The corridor seems infinitely long and endless now. Candles go out one by one mysteriously. The house plunges into complete and total darkness. In the darkness, only soft giggling is heard. Labubu is nearby, but completely invisible. Light returns suddenly. Family finds themselves in living room. Everything looks normal and peaceful again. On the table lies a mysterious note. Welcome home. The strange handwriting frightens everyone deeply. Peppa looks up and sees wet marks. Labubu is still somewhere in the house. The family no longer feels safe at home. Every night they hear giggling from the bathroom. The forest always seemed like a safe place for Peppa's walks. But today something felt terribly wrong. Strange glowing light pierced through the trees ahead. Peppa felt an unexplainable chill in the air. Curiosity overcame caution and growing fear inside her. Peppa slowly walked toward the light source. Behind a large oak tree, a glowing portal appeared. It pulsed with an ominous blue light. Familiar sounds echoed from the portal entrance. SpongeBob's laughter and friends' voices carried through. Peppa couldn't resist the overwhelming temptation to explore. She stepped directly into the glowing portal. The world on the other side looked familiar, but something was horribly wrong with everything. SpongeBob greeted her with a wide smile, but his eyes glowed with red light. Patrick stood nearby with an empty stare. His smile was too wide and creepy. All characters moved too slowly and mechanically. Their movements seemed unnatural and disturbing. SpongeBob offered Peppa to stay forever here. His voice sounded distorted and frightening. Peppa tried to return to the portal, but it had vanished without trace behind her. The sky grew darker with each passing minute. Stars turned into evil red eyes. Houses in Bikini Bottom looked completely destroyed. Windows glowed with ominous orange light. All town residents surrounded Peppa in circle. Their faces were twisted with evil grimaces. SpongeBob began laughing with mechanical laughter sound. The echo carried throughout the entire world. Peppa realized she was trapped in nightmare. This world was opposite of the real one. She tried to run away from crowd, but wherever she ran, they followed closely. Evil versions whispered strange words to her. Peppa couldn't understand their dark meaning. The world began slowly dissolving around her completely. Reality became increasingly more distorted. SpongeBob reached out his hand toward her. His fingers were sharp like razor blades. Peppa screamed and woke up at home, but a strange blue mark remained on her hand. She looked out window toward the forest. The ominous light still flickered there. The portal waited for her return patiently. SpongeBob smiled from the forest darkness. Peppa realized it wasn't just a dream. The evil world still called her back. The Pig family house always seemed like the safest place in the world. But today, something dark was stirring within its cheerful walls. George sits alone in his room, staring at Mr. Dinosaur. A strange whisper echoes in his mind. The voice speaks softly, calling George's name repeatedly. George looks around confused, seeing no one there. Peppa enters the room, noticing George's strange behavior. George appears distant and doesn't respond to her calls. The whisper grows stronger, telling George about a beautiful lake. George's eyes become glassy and unfocused. Mummy Pig calls everyone for lunch downstairs. George moves like he's in a trance. At the dinner table, George stares blankly ahead. The family exchanges worried glances about his silence. The voice in George's head becomes clearer now. It speaks of cool, peaceful waters waiting for him. George suddenly stands up and walks toward the door. Daddy Pig asks where he's going, but George doesn't answer. Outside, George walks past Grandpa Pig's garden. Grandpa notices the boy's strange, empty expression. The whisper guides George toward the old lake. His footsteps become mechanical and purposeful. Susie Sheep and Rebecca Rabbit see George walking alone. They call out, but he doesn't hear them. George reaches the edge of the dark lake. The water reflects his pale, emotionless face. The voice becomes urgent, commanding George to enter the water. George takes his first step forward. Peppa arrives at the lake, calling George's name desperately. But George seems completely under the voice's control. The whisper promises George eternal peace beneath the waves. George's eyes turn completely black. Mummy and Daddy Pig arrive, shouting for George to stop. But the voice drowns out their calls. George takes another step into the cold water. The lake seems to pull him deeper. The family reaches the water's edge, but George continues walking. The voice has complete control now. George disappears beneath the dark surface of the lake. Only ripples remain where he once stood. The family stares in horror at the empty water. The whispers fade, leaving only eerie silence. Days later, strange sounds echo from the lake at night. Some say they hear George's voice calling others to join him. The lake remains still and dark, but locals avoid it now. They know something evil lurks beneath its surface.